Welcome to Clips and Dip live. Gonna vamp a little bit at the top here to get some people some time to come on in. It's just me and Adam today. Adam, how are you doing?
I'm good, Will. Thanks again for coming on last night, doing a little Clips and Double Dip on AM 570 LA Sports on Clippers Talk. That was a fun time as we continue to mull over the fact that Kawhi Leonard is not in the MVP conversation. We can talk more about that too coming up a little bit because I found some more damning evidence of media malpractice. But yeah, we've been having some fun with it. Just try to bring attention, try to bring some positive light to Kawhi Leonard. If nobody else is going to do it, we're going to do it here on Clips and Dip.
Some other positive stuff in the Clippers realm. Clippers currently have the best offense in the NBA. And speaking of our should-be MVP leader, Kawhi Leonard, he also had some interesting things to say about the Clippers' lack of defensive effort. You kind of rarely hear Kawhi sort of go in on an aspect. But these comments actually got me kind of excited. So we will show that audio here a little bit later in the episode and talk about that as well. We're also going to talk about the historic season with four Hall of Fame players all together, but two of them hitting the 25K point mark in the same season. Adam, I hope you did some research on whether that's been done before or not.
Didn't have to. Everybody else already told me.
They told you. Okay, great. And then we'll also talk about Amir Coffey's continued great stretch of play and how the Clippers will wrap up on this Grammy road trip. All right, Adam, where do you want to kick off? Do you want to talk a little bit? We talked a little bit post-game about that win versus the Pistons, but why don't we just jump off there? Now that you've had a little bit more time to stew on it, do you have any thoughts on that win over the Pistons?
Just some wild swings in a ball game where the Clippers could be down 14, and I know it's Detroit, but you still felt like, as opposed to past years, that eventually they were going to figure it out. We just kind of saw that in DC the game before, where in that third quarter they outscored them 40-19 and pulled away and got up by 29. And then against the Pistons, after being down by 14 in the first quarter, they cut into that lead rather quickly as Russell Westbrook came into the ball game and helped turn things around. And I thought had one of his best games as a Clipper. Do I have to go back to hating on him now to fit this false narrative because I was just praising Russell Westbrook? Andrew?
Adam just got a comment on the stream. If you're listening to this audio, not watching us live, which you should be, that's over at youtube.com/@ClippersPodcast. But Andrew wanted to know why Adam hates Westbrook so much. Why do you, Adam?
He said he's kidding, so he knows that's not the case. But I don't know if he's kidding about Amir Coffey starting. We'll talk about Amir and how good he's been too coming up here. But just the fact that the Clippers could pull it together, get up by 20. So a 34-point turnaround happened in that ball game. It still was too close for comfort late. More on that with the Kawhi Leonard comments post-game. But I think you've had the most amount of confidence in this particular Clippers team in the 2-1-3 era of being able to weather storms. And look, they've had plenty of comebacks, obviously. They've had the most 20-point comebacks over the last 5 years of any team, historic comebacks, down 35, second biggest comeback all time in DC a couple of years ago against the Wizards. And obviously, even before 2-1-3, the 31-point comeback in the playoffs.
Can I say something about that, though? Like, at least in terms of the regular season, this is not that team. This is not those teams. And I'm not saying that in a pejorative way or a negative way. This team just should really never be getting to those lows, to those points. And it's great to see them like have these big swings and turnarounds. But for the most part, you don't expect them to go down big like that. And it's not even just because of the talent level, right? I do think that the talent level got us through a lot of things earlier in this run. But right now, I feel like with how cohesive the whole squad is playing, I don't feel like they're that team anymore that goes down deep. Not that I don't think that they're capable of a comeback when it does happen, but we just don't see it as much. And it's not going to be as frequent as it has been over the last 4 years.
No, definitely. But I would say even then they had some of those games when Kawhi and Paul George were both playing, and they never should have been down double digits to the extent that they were. But you're right. There's more faith in this team being a dominant team. They are the hunted now, and they're playing like a team that knows they have the talent disparity in their favor just about every single night out there. But they still have had slow starts like we saw in Detroit, even with Paul George back. But there's a level of belief and confidence now that they're going to figure it out pretty quickly here. And once they do, this game's going to be over. They're going to slam the door shut. It took far too long probably in that Detroit game because it was still within the range of possibility. I think the Pistons were down something like 10 with 3 minutes left or 4 minutes left. That's a winnable game still. But hey, they just beat OKC recently. They just almost won in Cleveland. They gave them about as good of a run as the Clippers did on Monday when they were taking on the Cavaliers. So I think they're starting to, I don't know, obviously they're the worst team in the NBA and all that, but they're playing a little bit better right now. But the Clippers, look, that performance from Kawhi, 33 points, just 17 shots to get there. I thought overall Paul George was very good in stemming the tide in the fourth quarter where he had 10 of his 18 on, I think, 8 of 16 shooting. So a lot of positives still for me. Do you want to see them pull away earlier and make it easier on themselves? Of course. And that, I think, leads into those post-game comments from Kawhi Leonard, because this is a guy who is chasing perfection and knows what it takes to win a championship and doesn't want to see any slippage and doesn't want to see any bad habits out there. So do we want to play this audio now, Will?
Yeah, let's get into it. After post game, after the narrow win in Detroit, Kawhi had some comments, and I don't have Charles here to man the screen share, so let's hope I don't mess this up.
Currently, Law Murray is the only beat writer that is on the road that I know of covering the Clippers intimately like this. After, for whatever reason, the LA Times didn't think the hottest team in the NBA should continue to be covered closely and let go of our friend Andrew Greif. And that is upsetting to me to no end. But here was Law Murray in the locker room afterwards speaking with Kawhi Leonard.
And then, as far as this particular game goes, you guys were down 14, was able to make another comeback win and everything. Like, what do you guys feel like you need to do to, you're going to play this team again next Saturday in the matinee. Y'all know how the matinees go. So,
It's a matinee.
Early start game.
Day game?
Yep, day game. So, but in general, not about even the Pistons. I know it's about y'all. What can y'all do to lock in to start games a little bit better?
Get ready.
I mean, it's between our ears. Tonight we were terrible on the defensive end. We gave up 120 points, 120-something points. I feel like we just been winning games off talent, even on the offensive end. You know what I mean? It's just a lot of isolation or a lot of just slow pace. And it starts with our defense. You can see it on defense, and we're slow pace. We're starting off slow. So we have to see who we want to be and see what goals that we have set for ourselves, because I just feel like these last games we're just winning based off talent. We need to be winning off of execution, playing hard throughout the whole 48 minutes, and then let talent take over in the times that we do need it.
And then I would say that then you got a back-to-back to finish this, and if it's a mental trip to start, it's got to be a mental trip to end it, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we got to play two tough teams. I've been playing pretty well. Going to Miami is never hard, but we just got to stay focused, get some rest, and then be ready to lock in and do what we need to do.
That to me. Right. Go ahead, Will.
Oh, I was just going to say, so if you're just tuning into the stream now, or if you missed it, basically Kawhi talked about how he thinks that this team has at times been coasting on their talent, where this team is coming up short or starting slow. He said starts between the ears, and it's really the defensive end. And he did mention too how the offense has stagnated at times. They've just gotten into ISO stuff, and they've really been able to lean on their talent in a way. in a way that he doesn't think is with the mindset of what they're trying to do and what they're trying to achieve. And somebody mentioned it in the comments, but if you missed this or you couldn't hear it, but this is like one of the most sort of in-depth or like long-winded, I guess, answers that you're ever going to get from Kawhi. So I loved seeing this personally.
I think that's about as encouraging of a leadership off the court moment as you can get from Kawhi Leonard, to get that lengthy of a response, for him to elaborate to that end. And he's spot on. And I think it might be strategic. Kawhi is probably not going to be the guy to go up to every player individually and tell them this. But if he puts it out
he
there
might
like
be,
this,
though.
He might, or he might just turn down a fist bump and then, hey, we got to lock in tonight.
There's friction here.
But it's an easier, more efficient way, as Kawhi Leonard's all about efficiency right now, to get a message out to the entire locker room that we can't get by on just talent. It has to be about execution, because in the playoffs, you're playing talented teams in a 7-game series consistently. That's not good enough. Starting games slow, and him saying it's between the ears, it's a level of focus they need to have. They need to be locked in. That is very telling. That's stuff that Clipper Nation has asked for from this team. It was just great to see Kawhi Leonard just articulate it so perfectly there as their best player on the team during a stretch where they've been this good still, and he is demanding more out of them. That's what's most important to me.
I like that this isn't like sort of like the backhanded locker room comment. Like, we didn't hear this during the 6-game losing streak. You know what I mean? This comes off a lot differently in that period of time. I think when the team is winning, and I'm assuming vibes are pretty good in the locker room just with how good things have been going, and you're still trying to get people to this mentality. It's still very clear what your goal is and where your head is at. And like Kawhi acting as that leader, looking from the top to bottom for everybody else to lock into that mindset, I think I just don't know what else you want from him as a leader.
I think it's also an important time of the season where you can have some of those dog days right before the All-Star break, before the sprint starts afterwards, and everybody's looking at the standings more consistently and trade moves come into play. This is a time where you can have letdowns and let-ups, and that's probably what happened early on in Detroit. And he's trying to kick them in gear and not let it happen, not let this team get complacent out there. He's always talked about going back to what happened in the bubble when they lost that Game 7 to the Denver Nuggets. Afterwards, the one thing he stressed was we have to get smarter. We have to be smarter out there on the court. He's always looking to refine things, to make things better. And to chase perfection, like I said, hoping to catch greatness, I think is the old line. And that's Kawhi. When you come up with the San Antonio Spurs, you know what it takes. You know what a championship team looks like. And I think going back to training camp, he knew this team had it in them. He's got to kick him in the butt here and there, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And, with the Harden addition, I mean, this is the most talent that they're ever going to have. And we still don't know what free agency holds and what next year holds. But to see how locked in he is to right now, I think is incredible. Yeah, man.
It is one of my favorite quotes coming from him. And all season long, he's also said, when he was going through that stretch and Tomer Azarli, he's still in that stretch, by the way. He is still in this hot streak. Last 27 games, Kawhi Leonard at 57%, make it 58%. You could round up there from the field, and 51% from three. And they're asking him about this, and this is over a month ago now. And he's like, yeah, I'm more focused on something bigger than a stretch. And then with him getting that new contract extension, post-game, he's talking about taking this team to new heights. I think some people were skeptical. Oh, Kawhi's playing back-to-backs, and he's playing more now because, he and Paul George, it's a contract year. Well, he got the contract, and he is still completely focused on trying to win this team a championship. I think he knows his legacy, to some degree, can still be enhanced, and it would be. because it would just be LeBron James as lead guys to win with 3 different teams, I think, in the history of the NBA. And he could do it with 2 teams that have never won a championship. Obviously, the Cavaliers hadn't with LeBron, but the Lakers had. They had the second most to Boston when he won. So it's like ho-hum for those fans. Bringing a championship to the Clippers would mean everything. And Kawhi Leonard wants to get them there, and everything he has been saying has been on point and exactly the type of stuff you want to hear from your leader, who doesn't, the soft-spoken, laconic guy. He's so stoic out there. And for him to go off for a minute like that, I just think after a win is really telling.
I think too, this team understands what's left of the window, right? I think if we look back to 2020 and how things kind of fell apart there, I think there was probably a collective idea that, if it doesn't happen this one, we have a lot more kind of cracks at the apple, right? And I think seeing how things have gone since then, how unpredictable things are, how quickly the landscape competitively of the NBA can change, I think there's probably a pretty real realization internally about, what the rest of this looks like, the future of Kawhi and Paul George. And I think what we've seen this season really across the board is everybody stepping up to that challenge and everybody really willing to make this. I mean, I don't think it's this dramatic, but if this was to be the last dance, like the absolute, the best shot that they've ever had, that they've ever given themselves in the regular season. And if things go as we've seen them at their peak so far this season, what could be their best postseason in the 2-1-3 era.
Oh yeah. And I think coming into this season, we all kind of agreed universally, this looks like a last dance type of season. It's year 5 of this experiment. Now Kawhi's under contract, and he came out post game and said, he believes that pretty much everybody else is coming back. What's Wayne Jenkins saying here, Will?
Wayne Jenkins says Kawhi is pretty clear first-team All-NBA forward with Giannis and Jokic, but it feels like he may end up on the third time with some PR some of the guys get, despite him being an all-timer already. If he's not a first-team All-NBA forward, I am going to throw my computer through the window.
Is first-team positionless now? Is it still forwards? Is it like the All-Star game where it's backcourt and forwards?
I thought it was positionless now.
Okay, so he'll have a better chance, I guess, right, in that scenario. Look, nobody has been on top of this more than me and Big Will. We have been screaming to the high heavens that Kawhi Leonard needs to be in the MVP conversation, and I think it's somewhat media malpractice that he hasn't been so far. Like, they are dropping the ball. The national narrative is not being shaped around how good Kawhi Leonard has been over this stretch of 2.5 months where the Clippers have been the best team in the league. And when you take into account everything, the fact that he's double teamed constantly and he's still putting up these 58% from the field, 51% from 3, 90% from the free throw line shooting splits speaks volumes. The fact that he's playing all-world defense and they are 10 points worse per 100 possessions defensively with him off the floor should speak volumes. And then you factor in all the winning going on with this ball club. What else do you need? And I heard this earlier today from Justin Russo. I was listening to the Sports Ethos podcast with Brandon Marcus, and Basketball Reference. Now, granted, I don't know how they calculate this, but they have what's called on their site, and we're talking about basketballreference.com here.
Never heard of it.
2023-2024 NBA MVP award tracker. They have top candidates, and they say it's based on a model built using previous voting results. Players must have played in at least 70% of the league-wide average for team games to qualify. So I don't know about this whole previous voting results thing, but they do not have Kawhi Leonard top 10 in their NBA MVP award tracker on basketballreference.com. And we talked about it last night on Clippers Talk, but Kawhi Leonard is tied for 7th or 8th in MVP odds to win this season. And by tied, I mean He's back with a bunch of guys who are plus 10,000. So you'd bet 100 to win $10,000. His odds are that far down. That is unconscionable with how good he has been.
Yeah, I the only whisper I've really heard about Kawhi in the MVP conversation was on like Brian Windhorst and the Hoop Collective show. I can't remember if it was Bontemps who brought it up, but that's the only one. And even then, it was it was definitely a dark horse sort of a candidate, which I don't know. It's difficult, I feel like, to get past some of the narrative stuff. And even though I think Kawhi has done a lot to change all that's been said about him narratively, over this last 4 or 5 years, I just don't know that I don't know that it's enough for a seat at the table from other people's perspective, not from mine, obviously. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. So we're getting some injury report news. It looks like Zoo is going to be questionable for tomorrow, but I think this is a good time to take a little break for our audio listeners, and let's jump back in. Adam, you have some interesting stuff about the Clippers offense that I can't wait to get into. So ads have been a little bit loud for some. If you're watching this live, baby, there's no ads. You can do that, of course, over at youtube.com/@ClippersPodcast. But anyways, ads coming up in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back in. This is Clips and Dip. I'm Adam Oslin. He's Will Updike. We got a live for you going right now on YouTube. It will be in podcast form, or you're maybe listening to this later on today. But it's good to be with you guys. Coming up, we're going to talk a little bit more. You know what? I have an apology to make. We'll also talk about Amir Coffey. We'll also talk about the last 2 games remaining on this Grammy road trip a little bit more in depth. We talked about them the other day with Charles Mockler too. But the Clippers now have, I saw this, 122 points per 100 possession offensive rating, which is an all-timer. Although that's not on the season still. We're looking at, I think, since November 17th, since the Clippers reconfigured the starting lineup, inserting Terrence Mann. Now, they obviously had games where Paul George has missed a few. Kawhi Leonard has missed a couple. Ivica Zubac, and we do have an update on him as people are updating us here in the comment section. But you look at this team.
Questionable.
Zoo is, which is amazing, considering we thought post All-Star break at best. Just get him back for the 17 games in March. Shout out Chuck Mockler. This Clippers team, yes, since November 17th, since they've been on this wild winning streak with 29 victories to just 8 losses, they have an offensive rating of 120 effing 2. The James Harden effect is big with this ball club right now, and they're just humming. But you listen to Kawhi Leonard in those comments in the last segment, he said he still felt like they're going through the motions and getting by too much on talent than execution, even on the offensive end. So there's still room to grow. That's what makes this team really scary. They can still get better. Believe it or not, they've only played with James Harden for about 35 games so far. This is still a team that's going through that adjustment period, learning curve. And now when they get Paul George back into the starting lineup like they did yesterday, maybe that's part of the reason they struggled early on. It still takes some time. And I just want to see them get Big Zoo back, be whole, and get some of those rotations locked in before the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. I have questions about a questionable for this team, but whatever. That's a conversation for another time for how this team sometimes does some of the injury designations. Do you think that they work? Do you think he comes back into the starting lineup? Do you think you have to work him in behind Mason? What are you doing here with Big Zoo? This is in the long shot chance that he actually is ready to go sometime on this Grammy road trip, which I actually still don't see. But let's just go from there. If he is above questionable to probable, where do you slot him in?
Well, it's great news that he is at least with them there and now listed as questionable. It makes me think much differently about the injury, where I thought it could have been, something that was more alarming considering he's dealt with it over the past couple seasons. So that's really positive news right there, because as we talked about, Ivica Zubac, I think, is their 4th most important player. I think he'll be back in the starting lineup, even if he's on a minutes restriction. They'd put him back out there, even if he's only at 20 or 25 minutes, just to soak up some of that time in the front court. And then you got decisions to make with Mason Plumlee and Daniel Tice, and who plays more there. Nobody can make up for the loss of Big Zoo. We've seen that play out. There have just been
we talked about that
games.
just last night. We're like, these bigs have been up and down. They've been doing their best to fill in what is just a massive crevasse that has to be figured out for this team.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the game against the Cavaliers, against the Lakers, even against the Wizards. I mean, when the Clippers have made a lot of their runs, they've been going small. They've just been leaning into offense. Kawhi Leonard's playing the freaking 5 out there, but don't give him any love for that in the MVP voting. They've been holding it down by going small. That has been one of their best options. Meanwhile, Ivica Zubac was finally closing out games this season. That's how good he has been, especially since they brought in James Harden, and there's been that great pick and roll connection with those two. So they're missing not just backline defense, one of their guys that was thriving offensively and really coming into his own, having his best stretch of his career. You can't take it lightly or downplay the fact that Ivica Zubac has missed this time, and the Clippers have still kept things going without him, but you know this team can reach all-time heights with him. So I think when he comes back, he'll be in the starting lineup, and maybe it's just a matchup-dependent thing when it comes to Mason Plumlee and Daniel Tice. If you're taking on a team that's a little bit bigger, you want more size, it's Mason Plumlee. Otherwise, maybe Daniel Tice has earned more reps because he's been that good. He really has, and he continues to contest everything, regardless of if he's going to get dunked on or not.
Yeah, I think it just depends on how you run those rotations, what Zoo's minutes load looks like, especially at the beginning. I think could determine a lot about who's next up, at the 5, who's going to get more of those minutes and more of that trust. But having the versatility, I think, is great. Like we talked last night about the center rotation, which I think is one of the deepest in the Western Conference, if not in the entire league. But we actually got a question here. Adam, do you think we need to trade for a bigger wing to play the small ball 5? Where are you at on that? We already have, assuming Ivica Zubac returns to health, 3 healthy rostered centers.
I do think there's one more phase or facet to this team and this roster that could be unlocked if you had a guy who could not only play the small ball 5, but could be used as a 4 next to Ivica Zubac, next to 2-1-3 and James Harden. That does interest me. Obviously, the prototype or the archetype would have been somebody like Nicholas Batum or Rocco. Those guys are gone. The trade was the right move to make. If you could pull in someone like PJ Washington from Charlotte, and I know he's not the outside shooter you're looking for, but rim runner, athlete, vertical threat, that would be big for this team. People talk about Dorian Finney-Smith a lot, but it seems like it's going to take a lot.
Rim runner? Like, do we need another wing who can't really shoot from the outside?
If he can guard multiple positions, then look, I'm not saying this is a need for them to win the championship. They have this glaring hole on this team, and if they don't fill it, they don't have a shot. I'm just saying, can you strengthen a strength still? Can you figure out some of those flaws that could be exposed in stretches in the playoffs where you're then kicking yourself and saying, damn, we should have gotten that guy at the trade deadline, and we didn't, and we missed, and we waited to see it play out in the playoffs. Because one of the things that Coach Lue has always said is, we've never had a chance with Kawhi and Paul George fully healthy to complete a playoff run to figure out what we're missing. But as we talked about earlier, with the sense of urgency with this team needing to win now, with Kawhi being 32 and Paul George 33, I don't think they have the luxury to just go into the playoffs without trying to prep for things that just could, be issues that could arise. They got to try to figure out what, could be a problem, even though they're on this winning streak. Just continue to try to refine things and get better.
Yeah, well, and there's also not an issue with redundancy, with as we see right now with Tucker on the roster still, right? Like it's not really hurting anything for him to not be in the rotation. It's currently not really hurting anything for Bones Highland to not be in the rotation. So I guess depending on the asking price, I am all for grabbing another wing, certainly. I mean, I guess it just depends on how big of a factor you want them to be into the DNA of what this team already is. Like I think something like a Jeremy Grant or something like that is maybe too big of a move for me, because I feel like you're fundamentally changing the core, like the core of sort of what this team is once again. And I don't know if that's the right move, especially given how things have gone so far, if that's the approach that I want to take at this point in the season.
That's a great point, because as much as people have been clamoring for continuity, you finally have some of it. You don't want to completely upend that with a drastic move that really changes how this team plays next to one another, and you go through another losing streak just figuring out minutes, rotations, lineups. It can create issues. It can create more problems when this team finally looks like the chemistry is there. They're gelling, they're meshing, they're playing at this really high level. If you bring in a guy that's all of a sudden going to be in the starting lineup, when the starting lineup has been phenomenal with Terrence Mann, that could change things. That could lead to some downside as well.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that there aren't better players in the league than Terrence Mann or anything like that. It's just, for me, it's a little bit of an if it's not broke, you don't need to fix it situation. I mean, basically every year that we've had a healthy Kawhi and Paul George going in to go into the playoffs, we've made a big midseason move. And it would be nice. It would be nice maybe if that wasn't the situation this year, is all I'm saying. Especially because I think one of the more interesting things about Denver and their championship run is just how, I mean, the Aaron Gordon move was a larger move, but like they have this continuity that I think really did help them get over the hump. Obviously, they have the talent, and Jokic has and Murray and their game together has improved. But that happens with continuity, and that happens with some consistency in the guys around them. So yeah, it is kind of one of those things that I am envious of for some of the other teams when they have that sort of thing. And even Denver, who knows if they were able to keep the entire championship roster together, where they slot in the West right now, right? Like, would they be just running away with it again like they did last season?
Well, and it goes back to what Kawhi Leonard said earlier, getting by on talent. You only want to do that in select situations. It starts with execution, and that ties in to building up that chemistry. I saw, Jeremy Mormon says we need a role player, but I saw this from Ramaz Street, who says the thing is Kawhi gets doubled 8 times a game, and it's only going to go up during the playoffs. I don't really trust PG and Harden to knock down shots on a consistent basis.
Whoa! What?
It's like, if you can't trust those guys,
like high 30-40% guys from the outside, who do you trust more?
Yeah, what's the move then, Ramaz Street? So you do want to take one of those guys out of the starting lineup or trade one of those guys somehow? Come on, what are we doing here? They're either going to win with those guys, or they're not going to peak and reach their championship aspirations. This is the squad. This is who they have. You have to trust those guys. And I still feel like Paul George's run without Kawhi Leonard in the 2021 NBA playoffs somehow gets overlooked. People still say like, oh, playoff P and stuff. And it's like, guys, the last time we saw him have to lead a team, he got him to the Western Conference Finals for the first time in franchise history. What are we talking about with multiple huge ball games of 40 points in game 5s? Same reaction as Will's. Whoa. Those are the dudes you're rolling with.
Those are absolutely the dudes you're rolling with. And sure, if if Harden and PG both have, if they combine in playoff games where they're both really inefficient from the field, yeah, you might lose that game. You might drop that game. But I think that A, what are your other options of the same high level talent? And B, I think I'm still willing to ride out those odds. And we talked a little bit about this. Nekias Duncan talked about some of Kawhi's sort of issues in the double, how his efficiency sort of goes down somewhat. But I think, and you and I talked about this, like it's not going to be a picnic to try and double Kawhi in the playoffs. Like this team is going to be able to hurt you anytime you're sending two defenders at Kawhi.
Yeah, I'm not that overly concerned with it. We talked about that video. I just feel like there's a reason that they're the best three-point shooting team in the league, and it's about getting teams out of rotation because of all the talent on the floor. And when you double, they are finding the open man for the most part. And yes, they can still work on that. But people are coming back at me saying, yeah, it wasn't just Paul George. Of course it wasn't just Paul George, but he was the best player that teams were game planning for each and every night once Kawhi Leonard went down and had historically great numbers throughout that playoff run. He had, I don't know if we can pull this stuff up, but I think he was first in points scored through the first couple of games of the NBA Finals.
Yes.
Like, what are we talking about here? And people are bringing up the bubble. Yes, a lot of fluky stuff happened in the bubble. Paul George was not good at the end in the Denver series. You know who else wasn't? Kawhi Leonard in that game 7. Like, do we ever expect that to happen again? No. He came back, had the game 6 on the road, 45-point game against the Mavs, and then Paul George more than held up his end of the bargain, taking this team to new heights afterwards.
I think that playoff run is so much more indicative of what this team really is than the 2020 year. And I'm not here to make excuses. Clippers blew what was a golden opportunity. Obviously a weird situation. I think if your thoughts of Paul George in the playoffs are still in that Denver series, or your thoughts of Kawhi, man, we've moved pretty far past that pretty clearly in the playoff series that we've seen them in since.
Moses, you're talking about old stuff, so it tracks, but he's saying Kawhi played 4 out of the 6 games in the Jazz series. We are aware, and it was 2-2, and the Jazz were supposed to win that series and had the best overall record in the league that season. And Paul George was tremendous in that game 5 on the road when they just found out Kawhi Leonard, who flew with them on the plane, wasn't going to be able to go.
Man, a lot of people are down on Paul George in the chat right now. Jeremy says Paul George just needs to have a remember what I can do game. Feel like we haven't seen one for a while. I mean, the efficiency hasn't been what it was.
He's hurt.
The guy's been dealing with a groin injury. I think it's one of those things that he's just going to have to get back to 100%. I would guess that he's at like 80 right now.
So let's talk about that, because last night post game, Bob Murray again spoke with Paul George about his health and where he was at. And he basically said that this groin injury arises throughout the season at some point. He's always had it. He gets through it. He comes out on the other side. So it's common for him. He's been dealing with this for years. But remember, last season, he went through a rough stretch and then started to feel really good and looked healthy, and you could tell. And then, of course, against OKC, when it looked like he had all that bounce back and had the 360 dunk in the half court, he gets injured. But this is kind of the wave that you ride, the roller coaster with Paul George and his health during a regular season. So it's been happening for a long time.
In the chat right now. Sorry to interrupt you, Adam, but Russ the Villager said Paul George had a streak of 17 straight 20-point games weeks ago. Thank you very much.
Of course, I don't like his icon of Russell Westbrook throwing up a brick and calling himself Russ the Builder there. But yes, Paul George. Remember,
Adam,
Paul
is this
George
your burner? You're the one who hates Westbrook.
How dare you? How dare you? Paul George was the one in the first 3 weeks of this season that was playing better than Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi eased his way into this season. Paul George, we were saying MVPG. That's what we were saying to start off this year. And it's not the first year in a Clippers uniform we have said that, where he's got off to really good starts. So Paul George said he was dealing with this groin injury. It's happened before, and it sounds like he knows how to manage it and get through it. So that made me a little bit less concerned about what's going on right now. And just the fact that he played in that game against Detroit, which I think was a little bit unexpected and looked pretty damn good.
He still has some bounce, and I feel like he's still like, while the team hasn't been super locked in defensively, I still feel like he has some flash moments every game where you're like, oh wow, Paul George is still doing it on both ends. Not the most efficient offensively, but what I don't have is like just fourth quarter numbers right in front of me. But if he had played the rest of the game like that fourth quarter, I think it looks a lot different.
Man, Ramaz Street, the last 2 games from Harden screams bad vibes. It's like, okay, let's ignore the other 30-plus games with James Harden having some of his most efficient nights and having a 4-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio. Like, guys, enjoy what's happening right now, please. Enjoy the journey. This is literally the best the Clippers have ever played in the regular season. This is the most dominant they have ever looked in franchise history.
Look, like, I think that's why people are worried, right? I think that's why people are worried. This is a franchise. This is a fan base. People get a little upset with being comfortable, right? Like we're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I'm not saying that still won't happen, but like this is the most for real this team has looked. This is the most dominant this team has looked. And the fact that they not only look this dominant, but they're still not pleased. They're still not satisfied. They're not like, okay, let's put our feet up. We got a good little lead. We like where we're sitting in the West. Let's coast into the All-Star break, get a little bit of extra rest and come back at it. Like the way that at least Kawhi is wanting this team to approach things every night. I'm feeling the most confident about him. I think that I have throughout the entirety of the 2-1-3 run.
Oh, no doubt. They've never asserted their dominance to this level where they can just flip a switch and destroy you and have one good quarter and win a game by 20. We've never seen stuff like that.
Yeah, that Detroit game I feel like is the perfect example. Like that game, it was ugly. It wasn't a great win. But it was still a big win. Like it was still a massive turnaround. That I think in other times of the 2-1-3 era, it's a nail biter win. And maybe we still get it out. Maybe we drop it on the road. But it doesn't look. You don't get those 12 like a 12-0 run followed up later by a 9-0 run. You know that sort of stuff.
And we're talking about a team that has beat the best of the best outside of Minnesota, who they didn't have Zubac against and still only lost by 4. They have proven they can beat Denver. They have proven they can beat OKC, Boston. They've beaten Phoenix multiple times. They have beaten heavyweights. They haven't just loaded up against the cream puffs in this league. They have beaten Dallas. They have beaten the Lakers, who looked to have their number earlier in the season. Of course, there was no LeBron in that one, but I just, people who want to live in that it's only all that matters is the playoffs. All that matters is the playoffs is missing a lot of fun during the journey to get there.
You also got to build there, buddy. Like you got to build there. It doesn't just start. Like it's not a story of 2 teams, right? And generally teams that we think throughout the regular season are going to flip the switch. What happens to a lot of those teams? They go home early. Like it's just the nature of how things go. This is a part of that. We can't predict what the playoffs are going to be. We still do not know. We don't even know what the matchups are going to be. So I think that right now we gotta enjoy sort of the forest for the trees. Junction is coming through with something. They said, seeing the Clippers not taking their foot off the pedal against Boston tells me everything I need to know about the 23-24 Clippers. I love that.
And they said that was a measuring stick game. They wanted to see where they are at. That is what Coach Lue said post-game. They got up for that game. They wanted to flex their muscles and show how dominant they could be. They were.
Yeah, Andrew also coming through with some hopefulness for PG and Harden turn it back on. Andrew said, look at man, he couldn't hit a shot and is now shooting lights out. Now is not the time to panic. Couldn't agree more, Andrew.
Ramaz Street's killing me. Let's be honest. Who else do you trust besides Kawhi? Let's not be comfortable. We need a banner when we open up into it. Hey, what's the alternative, Ramaz?
You're bordering on a timeout right now. You're bordering on a timeout. It is a feature that we have here. Come on.
Put him in the corner, Chicken Little right now. It's just
John says, I trust Amir Coffey.
Let's use that as
let's
a segue.
Talk Coffee. Let's talk Coffee. Yeah.
Amir Coffey, guys. We talked about the ridiculous numbers and the true shooting percentage and all that stuff. But if you just look back now in his month in January and then the 17 points he had yesterday against Detroit, this time coming off the bench. So you want to talk about flexibility and adaptability and having a guy that performs the exact same way, no matter how many minutes he gets out there. He's going to be efficient with them. He's not going to make a lot of mistakes. He could be in the starting lineup. He could be coming off the bench like he did and played 24 minutes and ended up with, 14 points against the Pistons. He had 17 in the start against the Washington Wizards. But Mr. Reliable, he has become that. We say that all the time with Big Zoo, but in his month of January, Amir Coffey shot 65% from the field and 52% from three. Yes, it's on low volume, but in some ways that makes it more impressive. When you don't know how many shots you're going to get, you may only get 3, 4, 5 shots in a ball game, and you take advantage of all of them when the pressure is on because there's so many guys on this team trying to get on the court. Amir Coffey has just been fabulous. I can't say enough about him, the professionalism, a guy who was lost in the shuffle completely last season after he had a really good 21-22 season, and I thought earned minutes, and he is back and then some.
Yeah, look, I think that Coffey, to me, is one of the best stories of the Clippers' internal development. As hard as we get on this team about their drafting, about their ability to, hone and develop young talent. You have Terrence Mann, who I think I don't credit him as much to the development team. I credit a lot of that to Terrence because I don't feel like his plan was particularly that well developed. He was constantly guessing as to what position he was going to be able to fill. But for Amir Coffey, to be around the team as much as he was, not getting the playing time and immediately be able to step up in the way that he has been, I think that is a testament to how they can develop players internally. Not saying that it always happens, but we know that they have the ability. And these are the kind of players. Look, if the Clippers have any window beyond this year, which I'm not saying that they don't, we just don't know. It's going to be because of guys like Amir Coffey. It's going to be because of these players highly overachieving their contracts, highly overachieving what they've been asked to do and step up on a night-to-night basis. I mean, we didn't talk about it in our recap of the Pistons game at the top here, but the bench was incredible. The bench was incredible in that game, and that's what you need to, both to get in those wins when you're on the road, when you're on these grueling sort of trips, certainly what you're going to need in the month of March, but in the grander scheme, the longer scheme, it's also what you need to keep your stars at your best if you want to extend a title window.
And we'll talk about the Russ milestone in just a second here, speaking of the bench. But I heard this stat on the Lob the Jam, the podcast earlier today in their post-game recap after the Clippers win in Detroit. Lucas Hahn had it. Amir Coffey from 3 to 10 feet out on the season is shooting 72%. The next best guy on the Clippers is Ivica Zubac at 61% from 3 to 10 feet out. He's making everything. He's a 3-level scorer right now. 3-pointers in transition, getting to the basket. You have a ton of confidence with him in transition for a team that hasn't been great in that area of getting easy buckets in traffic. But also he's got this little turnaround midi that he's had going at a really high rate.
Yeah, absolutely. We're getting some Carter Carone in the chat said Coffey's the type of dude that could win us a playoff game. Yeah, I don't know that he would single-handedly swing it, but he is definitely the guy that can get you over the hump.
Just having, that's a luxury, to have a guy that can stay ready and you know exactly what he's going to bring you. He could be out for weeks and you put him into the starting lineup, which is what happened when Paul George originally went down with the groin issue, and he just performs. There aren't that many guys that can play a role at this high of a level that give you that certainty that Amir Coffey does with this Clippers team.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
What's Lob City saying here?
Lob City coming through with something spicy. They said Coffey may have been our option at the backup wing position the last 2 seasons, but never got a chance over Batum, Rocco, and Morris. they added, he's definitely playing better than all those guys right now.
I don't think he's quite the versatile defender that Batum and Rocco could be.
Doesn't quite have the size, but he has been very good. He has been very good.
I mean, we're holding him to a high standard there, comparing him to those two guys. There's no shame in not being quite as versatile as Nicholas Batum, who's been guarding all 5 positions for a long time. But he's still good. He can still guard guys 1 through 4, and you'll take that every day of the week. I was screaming for Amir. I even pulled some of the video and put it on X at Follow Adam A earlier in the season when the Clippers are going through that losing streak. And I was like, what about Amir? Where's Amir at? And freaking out a little bit. Why aren't they giving him run? Even I couldn't have projected that he would get to this level where he is a staple in the rotation and a guy on this team friendly of a contract. So when people say, oh, he's playing himself into being a trade chip, it's like, are you really going to get equal value or close to for somebody who's making $4 million per year and can provide this much quality depth to your squad than Amir Coffey? I don't think so.
Yeah. I mean, we're getting a lot of love for Batum in the chat right now. I mean, you're not going to get, I don't think you're going to get any 2 larger Nick Batum Clipper fans than us right here, other than of course Spencer. But yeah, I don't know. I still think, given what you did, what you got back in the Harden trade, I think you'd do that trade 10 times out of 10.
Yeah. So I mentioned Russell Westbrook, but why don't we take a quick time out? We'll get to Russ talk. A career milestone for him last night in a game they won where he performed spectacularly and really got them pointing back in the right direction. But first, we got a few ads coming your way. Sometimes they can be loud. We got your back, Chuck. We're still taking care of everyone's ears. So you may want to turn it down in 3, 2, 1.
All right, we're back. If you're listening to the audio of this, we never left. If you're watching this live or on YouTube, that's at youtube.com/@ClippersPodcast. Subscribe, like, we appreciate it. Anyways, Adam, where do you want to kick off here? We got some interesting stuff. We got 2 Clippers reaching the 25,000 point milestone in the same season. I don't know. What do you want to get into?
Well, why not highlight Russ, who got there last night, and also it felt like he turned the game around. When you talk about a lethargic, sleepwalking-like effort that the Clippers had early on in the ball game, where they were down by 14 points in the first quarter to the Detroit Pistons on the road, it was 20-6, and at the 5:42 mark, Russell Westbrook entered the game for Terrence Mann, immediately got Mason Plumlee a bucket right afterwards. Then Kawhi got a driving layup off a Russ assist. He was shot out of a cannon, as he always is, but it was just the perfect scenario for him to shine and show how he contributes to this team, because that's a game that, I don't know, maybe they lose it without Russ. I don't know if I'd go that far, but they certainly don't get up by 20 and completely turn the game on its head if they don't have a guy like Russell Westbrook coming off the bench with that energy.
Oh, agreed. Yeah. Look, it's more about the efficiency, right? He's always going to bring the energy. He's always going to, that you can count on. That's a constant. And even that I do think is good, and it's important, and it is a tone setter, especially with the bench, you gotta, guys sort of got to be on notice. They got to bring the energy, especially given the pace that our starters can play with at times. I like that the second unit can kind of change things up. It's just a question, right, of what version of Russ are you getting? Is he taking good shots? Is he able to convert around the rim? If he's not able to convert around the rim, is he able to collapse the defense enough to kick out to a teammate? So it's just going to be those things. And honestly, some of it is within him. Some of it is going to depend on how they're choosing to defend him in that second unit. So there have been ups and downs, but I will say, the consistency of professionalism and character, and I mean grit and effort. I do think that is consistent, and that has been that. Yeah, it's one of those intangibles. That's to go back to the old Clippers. It's unstoppable.
He brings some of that Patrick Beverley type stuff that this team has needed over the past couple of seasons with intangibles, but he was making his layups, made a lot of them last night, knocked down a couple of threes as well. As I was looking over him in January, because I just noticed an inordinate amount of layups being missed and smoked by Russell Westbrook, where when he misses them going that fast, that is a turnover. That is a live ball turnover for a team that suffers with their transition defense. So I can't stress enough how badly he needs to get those to go. And I was looking through the first 2.5 months of the season, through the end of December. He was shooting 60% within 5 feet of the rim, which is good enough. It's solid. It's not amazing, but it's good enough. You'll take it. In January, Russ was shooting just 53% within 5 feet of the rim. But then last night, new month, and sometimes it's that simple for guys. New year shooting-wise for Terrence Mann, clean slate, and all of a sudden he's at 50% from three when he was struggling so much. Sometimes, I don't know if it's superstition or just guys feeling like they have, a new lease on the season, you could say, a new lease on life with some of the percentages and some of the things that were working against them. They can right the ship. Maybe that'll happen for Russ now in February when it comes to some of these layups and some of these gimmies in traffic that he's been missing recently, because last night he was much better in that area. And to cross the 25,000 point threshold and to become just the 25th player in NBA history to do so, it would be a layup from Russell Westbrook in the fourth quarter. So congrats to him. It's an all-time milestone. And rarefied air and company to be a part of in the NBA now. And I love that it happened in a Clippers uniform. It happened earlier this season for James Harden in a Clippers uniform. First time ever in NBA history, 2 players, same season, same team, got to 25K. So pretty cool.
Yeah, it's wild, man. It's hard because, I'm still so much in this season, but having 4 Hall of Famers on the same team is just wild. And like first ballot, like true blue Hall of Famers is pretty incredible. And for them to both hit those milestones in the same season is it's wild, man. And I think that there's a feeling of, I think that's another one of those things that has helped. Obviously, you have the talent, but I think everyone's kind of championing everyone else in a way that I don't know that this team has always had that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Know what else I've noticed that's different this season over the last couple of months? If you just go back the last 2 games in DC, in Detroit. Now, part of it is because those teams are so down right now at the bottom of the Eastern Conference, at the bottom of the league. But there has been more buzz and chance for the Clippers on the road than there ever has been, to my knowledge. And it's because, think about it. Hey, what do we want to do tonight? Oh, for $25, we could get into the Pistons game and see 4 Hall of Famers on the other side. That's what it is. Like, they become
Are you talking about traveling or at home?
Yeah, I just mean even from non-Clippers fans.
Gotcha.
With them being on the road right now, there's a draw element to just being able to go and see your local team in Detroit or DC. They're down right now, but you can go see 4 Hall of Famers for probably pretty damn cheap.
Yeah, totally.
And there have been some Clippers fans, it sounds like, that have been traveling very well because there have been some chants recently in these arenas.
Look, I know it's because, we're playing well and that's everything, but the fan experience, anytime I'm at the stadium, has been a lot different this season. I think I've brought this up before, but it's the best. It's the best that it's been since the Clippers lost to the Suns in the Western Conference Final.
Yeah. John Rengifo said, I was at the Wizards game. That is absolutely true. Tons of Clippers fans. Awesome. Awesome to see fans travel. Awesome to see them get this level of respect from NBA fans of the opposition. Wish the national media would start picking up on some of this. Trisha, I do not usually go to road games. In fact, the only one I've been to was Game 5 last year in Phoenix because we sensed it might be Noah Eagles' last game. calling it for the Clippers, and Jake Warner, our head engineer, and I drove out there late at night. We were literally in Phoenix for less than 24 hours. We left. I think the game was on a Tuesday night. We left Monday night after Jake works the Lakers game at Crypto at like midnight. We get in there at 5 or 6 in the morning in Arizona. We leave after the ball game at around 10 that night. So that's the only one. Typically, I'm back in Burbank. But this Clippers team, yeah, everything's pointing in the right direction currently, especially because of what we heard from Kawhi Leonard, where there should be no letdowns. He is keeping the pedal to the metal a little bit here. So a lot of positives. And currently, they've already had on this 7-game road trip their most successful Grammy road trip ever, Will. They're 4-1. They could lose the next 2, I think, and it would still be the best.
Adam hopes they do, because he predicted 4-3 on the road trip.
How dare
that's what he's going for. Back-to-back losses. Back-to-back.
No, I'm happy to take that L if it comes to that, okay? And I think it will. They just have to split one of the next 2. Miami's not going to be easy tomorrow because they just got a victory over DC last night, which I'm kind of happy about because they were on such a losing streak that you don't want them to get up for a game too much against the Clippers.
Yeah, of course.
Like, this is the time. We're going to turn our season around right now against the Clippers. Kind of what the Cavaliers had extra motivation there because they weren't getting any national attention because they didn't have that signature win, and they played fantastic against the Clippers, and they have been for a while now, but I don't want to see that with Miami and Heat culture tomorrow.
Yeah. What did they lose? 7 straight?
Something like that. It was unusual for a Miami Heat team who the Clippers also beat earlier this season at Crypto. They didn't have Jimmy Butler in that ball game. So not going to be easy. We don't know what the status of Paul George will be now with a back-to-back coming up. My guess would be he plays one of them, because it really does seem like he's trying to get to the All-Star break. He knows there's a light at the end of the tunnel. There's rest waiting for him. He just has to push through this last stretch and help this team right now, and then he can hopefully get back to 100%. But, yeah, this Clippers team has been that good currently on this Grammy road trip that I thought 4-3 would have been a very successful road trip. They're getting greedy. They wanted to get to 6-1. Coach Lou's put a mark on it. He said 6-1 was the goal before they left Los Angeles, which is pretty damn cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do, it's humility season still. And
yeah, you gotta is this where the big apology is coming?
I do have to make I don't know if it's a big apology here, but it's somewhat of an apology, and they don't happen that often from me because somebody last night, one of our listeners.
This is a half apology, a half receipt, which is not a real apology.
No. Well, okay, maybe it's a little bit of both those things, but still, it will be a real apology. This guy, Francis Meek, who tends to be very negative on X towards the Clippers, and when they were down by 14, he already said, like, this game's over. They're going to lose. They're back to playing down to their opponents. And I said, like, it's the first quarter, man. Like, what are we doing here? So he said, okay, if I'm right, you have to make a public apology towards me if the Clippers lose this game because he quoted humility season. And I said, well, what do I get if you're wrong? And he said, I'll apologize on Twitter here, which he kind of did, but he put in the caveat after the Clippers won that still it shouldn't have taken this much to beat a Detroit Pistons team. And at the time, it kind of bugged me. It was like, you're putting this qualifier on it. That's not really holding up your end of the bargain with this bet here. That's not honoring it to the degree I would have liked. But then with Kawhi Leonard coming out and saying what he did post-game, I started to think about it. It's like, you know what? He's right. This team, they do need to demolish some teams here and there. So, Francis Meek, I'm giving it to you. I hope you'll still be a fan of mine, even though I think he blocked me last night on Twitter, because I can be intense and opinionated sometimes, overly. I'm trying to do better in that area, though. So I apologize. I'm just very passionate about this team, as you can tell.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, I think it's a fair I think it's a fair criticism to expect more against the Pistons from this team. I think, what we got from Kawhi, I think is the best takeaway other than a win you can get in a game like that. At the end of the day, for me, it is a long road trip. If they do end up, if they do end up at that 5-2 mark at the end of this whole thing, you can't ask for much more. You can't ask for much more.
No, it's a stellar road trip. One of the best we have seen. One of the best in franchise history. And as much as Kawhi Leonard is calling for them to continue to play good basketball and not just get by on talent, it is nice to know that sometimes they can. That sometimes they're just so damn good that during a long 82-game season, there's going to be nights where you don't play your best, where James Harden goes 1 for 10, and they can still be up by 20 in a ball game. That's just stuff we didn't see before. It just felt like they always had to play far too often at a B+ type level, even just to beat some of the bad teams sometimes. And that's what is very different to me about this season.
Someone in the chat is asking, any word on the Clippers fixing our ugly ass logo? I assume that they're just waiting until into it. We already know the red jerseys are coming back. Well, I think we covered basically Kawhi's comments to the team. We covered the rest of the Grammy trip. Adam made his apology, which I'm kind of putting in air quotes because there was also a receipt brought up in the middle of it, which I don't know about all that. Adam, is there anything else you want to hit on before we get out of here?
Just excited to see this team hopefully go 5-2 on this road trip and then come back and I think take on the Pelicans later that next week. So I'm sure there's a lot of built up energy and support with the fan base wanting to see them back at Crypto.
It's been forever since the fellas were in town. It's been a long time.
The boys are back in town. The boys are back in town.
Exactly.
So a lot more excitement to come, and then the All-Star break, and then March, 17 games. Where were you when the Clippers swept March?
Charles has been previewing this for y'all since October, so
he's actually not here today because he's trying to build a time machine where he can go into the future. He doesn't want to wait. He can't even wait just 3 more weeks to get to March. He wants to be there immediately. So if you're wondering why Chuck's out, that's why.
That's why he's got to worry about March. I think that'll do it for us for today. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. If you're here on the stream, if you're listening to this later, thank you so much. You can listen to this podcast wherever you get your podcast. If you leave a rating or review over on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much again to everybody who tuned in for the live stream. You can do that over on Twitter. That's @ClippersPod. The best place to do it also is over on YouTube because we can have more interaction with you in the chat and stuff. That is youtube.com/@ClippersPodcast. Subscribe if you get the chance. It's always a good time. Adam, one quick positive thing on the way out.
Ivica Zubac upgraded questionable. Boom.
Love it. All right. Thank you all so much. We'll